Pre record. Okay. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Dominating Diversity, the podcast where we don't just talk about diversity as a checklist, but as real life, real people, and real complexity. I'm your host, Brooke Tahir, and today we're sitting down with someone who is not only a remarkable and recognized educational designer at Monash University, but also someone whose life story invites us to think more deeply about intersections of identity, place, and resilience. So I'm thrilled to welcome Prudence to the show. Prudence, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Brooke. It is delightful to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're so welcome. Only the best here. So, Prudence, you've carved out a path in education and design that's both creative and deeply thoughtful, but I know it hasn't been a linear or traditional journey for you. Can we start with early life, growing up in regional Victoria, and how that shaped your sense of self, especially coming into your identity as a queer woman?
Yeah, it's quite a lot there, isn't there?
A lot
Um,
to unpack.
um, well, yeah, as you said, I grew up in regional Victoria, right, which is a really, really nice part of the world, if
It
I
is.
do say so. I'm a big fan of regional Victoria. I spend a lot of time there. I sort of forged a lot of connections to that landscape and that space and that culture, to the extent that even though I've been based in Melbourne for a really long time, I go back there every chance I can, not necessarily to my hometown, but I like to be out there in the countryside with people and looking at the landscape and, hiking through
Yeah,
those landscapes. It's a really
yeah.
great
Get
spot.
back on
So
country. Yeah.
so I kind of feel a really keen connection to the place, and to the people in it. I guess with regard to what that means as someone who's queer, I suppose, I never really identified as queer until maybe till I was 13 or 14, and that word wasn't really used to describe those things back then.
Yeah.
But
Now that things have changed.
yeah, but I think I had some relatively liberated parents given the area, and they were from an even smaller town than I was, both of them. And I'm not sure why, but they had this really free idea of who you get to be and how you get to approach the world, and they really instilled that in their children. So I kind of just grew up knowing that whatever I was okay.
Mm.
It never occurred to me that it might not be totally the norm or the average in my community. And it wasn't really until I got to, maybe 12 or 13, that jumping out of primary school into high school kind of age where I started to think, oh, hang on a second. I think I like boys and I like girls, and maybe I just like everyone.
Yeah.
And
I
what
was
does
like that
that,
too.
yeah, what
Yeah.
does that mean? It didn't really mean anything to me at the time because no one was asking the question. Like
Can
it
be
was
confusing though to
unnoticed.
yourself. Yeah, it's a confusing feeling within yourself, I found anyway. Yeah.
Well, and I noticed quite quickly that like none of my friends or my siblings or anyone else felt that way too. It
Mm-mm.
wasn't until I was sort of maybe 15 or 16 I realized there were some other queer people around too. But for a while there, it was a bit of a lonely thing.
Yeah, yeah. So that experience of growing up as a queer woman in a rural community is something I think a lot of listeners will resonate with. It what doesn't maybe not rural Victoria, but anywhere around the world really. The feeling of being both visible and invisible at the same time. Um, I say people see what they see, and people see they don't see what they don't see, sort of thing, isn't it? It's a funny quote, really. But how did your environment impact your access to education and leaving school early?
Yeah. The visible and invisibility thing,
Mm-mm.
that's almost a hallmark of being a woman
Yes,
generally, let
right.
alone
Yeah.
in a regional area. But I would say just as an Australian woman,
Mm.
but definitely as a regional woman. And I would also add definitely as a queer woman. And I think that, visibility versus invisibility kind of came along in not necessarily getting noticed as the popular or the pretty girl, but also comments such as, you dance like a lesbian, or you dress like a lesbian.
Wow, I
These
didn't know
types of,
someone could dance like a
yeah,
lesbian.
these
Yeah,
really
show
are
us
funny,
that.
funny sort of comments that popped up in my teen years that I was like, oh wow, oh okay, I'm kind of visible and invisible, standing
Yeah,
out but not standing out at the
yeah.
same time in ways that kind of were really incomprehensible, right? Um, and they weren't necessarily negative things. Those comments weren't bad, but they just painted me out as being perhaps a little different. And I think that was something that really came out in terms of intellect as well. I was always a bright kid.
Mm,
Uh, and again, my parents
I
really
like that.
fostered that sense of being anything you want to be. I was really
Yeah.
lucky to have these parents who were like creating educational experiences alongside me. I think they realized I was a self-motivated thinker.
Mm,
Um, and in lieu of more rich educational experiences out there in the country, they would take me to a few extracurricular things in as much as they were able to. But there's not that many options out there. And they're both full-time working professionals, like blue collar,
mm,
trades. My mum was a nurse,
mm.
a midwife, actually. Like they did the best that they could. They did a really great job, I reckon. But I think from an access to education perspective, yeah, I didn't have equity, I would say. And that was really apparent at my school, at all of my schools, actually. You know, kids kids didn't necessarily, if you had an interest in debating, it's not like your parent was going to drive you to some debating thing after school. Like you just get on the bus and go home, hey, because that's what everyone did. It was not very common for people to get anything extra, I suppose. So children's educational requirements or enrichment requirements aren't really foregrounded in 90s regional Victoria.
Yeah.
So
Or
that's
regional
something,
Victoria still really? Yeah.
yeah. So that's something that we would think maybe metropolitan kids have more than we do. I mean, rightly or
Yeah,
wrongly, that would be
certainly.
the sentiment that, like, no, that's only in rich families or that's only in city families. There's a bit of an understanding that we're not getting stuff that other kids are getting. And I think I felt that pretty keenly in my
Mm.
access to educational experiences.
Yeah. So how did that lead to you leaving school?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. You know, I had and have still a chronic disease called ulcerative colitis,
Mhm.
which is a sort of has a suite of symptoms. It's an inflammatory bowel disease. And I think, for a young teen, having issues that affect your energy or anything to do
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
toileting, right?
Yeah.
That's a really sensitive thing for a
Yeah.
developing kid. And it became a little bit unmanageable, and it was recommended by my doctor and together with my parents that
Mhm.
I shouldn't go to school
Mm.
for a while that gets sorted out and managed.
Wow.
So I didn't go to school for 3 years. I
Wow.
actually left school and was doing homeschooling.
Yeah.
Uh, so that was, yeah, I guess another point of inequity in that might have been managed quite differently if I weren't in a regional setting or if I didn't have two working parents. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Things are so different in the country. I know I got diagnosed with Addison's disease, which is a adrenal failure, really. And I missed out on so much because to drive to a specialist, you've got to drive 2 hours. And it's not as
Yeah.
easy. You can only see a specialist once every few months. And then they send you home with this tablet and that tablet. If it goes wrong, there's nowhere really you can go. It's so different in the country, I think, from a perspective of having a chronic illness and then trying to manage it in a country setting is really
Yeah. And
difficult.
even outside of that medical component, even just educationally, like I was aware within distance ed that, they create a lot of synchronous opportunities for kids to come together,
Mm,
who are necessarily doing distance ed. There's lots of reasons people do distance ed, of course. Um, but I was really aware of the fact that it's 2 hours on a train for me to get to those events, whereas obviously children who are based in the city have just a lot more close access to having
mm,
those face-to-face social activities, which are pretty important for early teen
yeah,
development, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There is a lot more opportunities up here, definitely. Sorry, my email keeps going bloop, bloop, and I don't know how to turn it off. Sorry, everyone. But I guess it is important that we do talk about educational mobility, sorry. But here you are today, you made it, and you're working at one of Australia's most prestigious universities, which is a great outcome, I think. And I love that. The idea that education doesn't have to be a straight line that you can veer off, you can do it. how you need to now we've got distance education, we've got rural education, we've got metro, we've got all this type of education, but there's a lot more children now going that are going distance ed or online, but homeschooled, especially after COVID, I guess. Um, I also want to acknowledge, that for many women, particularly queer women, regional women, women living with chronic diseases, the road to professional stability is not just winding, it can be politically charged. So you've spoken previously about ulcerative colitis. And how has the chronic disease intersected with your professional life now? And what does that support really look like in those contexts?
Um, I think it really just comes down to flexibility. Ever since
Mm,
COVID, we've kind of been, well, a lot of us have been really benefiting from this enhanced flexibility
yeah,
in the workplace, and that has been life-changing for
yeah,
me. And
really.
that's true as a parent, just as a human, just
Mm,
as a busy working professional who's trying to run a household, on all sorts of different axes. I think it really is hugely empowering and
mm,
liberating to know that you can just jump online and attend a meeting if you need
yeah,
to, or know that you can keep working after the kids have gone to bed or whatever the case may be. So in terms of maybe needing a little bit of extra time to look after my health or to attend a specialist appointment or something like that,
mm,
I've benefited from that really big cultural shift towards flexible
mm,
workplaces that a lot of us enjoy. But to be honest, a lot of it's just been about having supportive people. So my team, my manager, the way our work is delegated, the way deadlines are placed, those are things that we do openly and with a lot of consultation, and that's been critical for me. I just have I have a huge privilege of working with a really supportive team and workplace, and my direct manager especially. I'm very, very lucky. I know a lot of people don't have that. And for me, it's the thing that's allowed me to really excel professionally.
Well, I'm not speaking Monash University up here or anything like that, but I work alongside you at Monash University, different department, however, and they've been amazing. We've both got chronic health conditions. I got brain tumors and multiple organ issues and failures. And I guess I've never worked at a place that's actually allowed me to go to an appointment if I needed to and work a bit later to make up for that time, or a team that is supportive. Like my team is super supportive and they want
Yeah.
to do what it takes to get me better or keep me healthy. And that's so important to have. And not many people have that. So I guess we should thank our lucky stars for that. And I mean, your health, your regional roots, your queerness exists alongside a role in a mixed rainbow family is something I
Yeah.
want to talk about as well. So you're a stepmom to kids with three mums and no
Yep.
dads. Yeah.
Mhm.
Tell us a bit about that beautiful blended world and how that shaped your view of what a family really means, because that is something that people would look at and go, oh, wow, that's different. But is it really different? They've all got love. Tell me about that.
Yeah. Yeah, I am. It's an absolute delight. I have the the great honor of being a step parent, which is a bit different to normal parenthood in that you choose to do it. It's most people choose parenthood, but maybe at different in different ways or at different times, or they're have different types of investment in that process over the course of gestation and birthing and child rearing, particularly as children move into adulthood.
Yeah.
Whereas for me, I kind of popped into the show pretty late in the game. My partner and I got together when her children were already just coming into their teens. So, we had a 10-year-old and a 14-year-old, right?
Yeah.
So I've met them at this really important time in their lives where they're moving away from being quite high needs smaller children into being more high needs teenage children. And that
Yeah.
is so cool. It's a really, really nice part of someone's life to get to be a part of. And they very graciously let me be a part of it. So,
Amazing.
step parenthood is one of the most exciting things that's ever happened to me. It's one of the most rewarding things that's ever happened to me. It's one of the most challenging things that's ever happened to me. It is just this whole collective bag of crazy that I never ever saw coming. I had never thought to have children myself. I'd never really had that urge. So to make the decision together with my partner that, you know what, I think, yep, let's do this. I'm going to be a step parent. That was, yeah, absolutely amazing. As a queer step parent in a rainbow family, as the term goes, that's another dimension to it that, to be honest, hasn't really rated in any point. Like not for me personally. There's a couple of times where we have to correct people a little bit. There's a lot of like assumptions people make about the fact that my partner must be a male.
Yeah.
Um, but my partner's a woman. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of assumptions that people make that her previous partner, so my kid's other parent, must be a male. And
Yeah.
well, she isn't. So that's fine. And sometimes I guess the kids themselves have to do a little bit of the legwork of correcting people or making sure that they're being properly identified. There's a lot of assumption there. So for example, I remember, in the lead up to Father's Day at school, my stepson was having to create some origami cutouts of some men's work shirts and some glasses of beer and these male themed things for a
Yeah.
dad. And it's like, well, first of all, he doesn't have a dad. And
Yeah.
second of all, why would I wear a work shirt to work every day and so does my partner. And you know what? I really like to drink a beer on a Saturday.
Yeah.
Like I'll totally go to the pub and have a beer with a meal. Like it's a really normal thing for women to do.
Mm.
So just talking them through, breaking down some of those really intense conventions around gender roles in this society is something to be honest, it doesn't come up that much because it's only if people really point it out.
Mm-mm.
I don't think they've run into too many issues with it, but whenever they come up, we just we just sort of help talk them through why that maybe doesn't match with our family unit, but they kind of take care of it all themselves, to be honest.
How
They're
old's the
really
oldest
yeah.
child, Prudence? Now.
Well, these days, actually, she's just turned 19. So
Oh, wow.
I've
And
got
there's never
myself a little
been,
adult in the house. It's really
that's
exciting.
amazing.
Yeah.
And there's never been any questions. Like, have the children always been accepting, or have there been questions around things, or how things work, curiosity?
No, I don't think so. I know that for them, when they start, sometimes there's a big change in life, like when you change schools, when you move from primary school to high school, or when you start with a new team for basketball each
Mm.
season or whatever. There's always that little moment where for them, they sort of have to explain that they have multiple mums.
Yeah.
And I think, aside from those moments, I don't know that they're experiencing anything too different from any other family across the
Quite
nation,
amazing though, because in this generation, kids are able to be different. And our generation, we've paved the way for that, for them to be included no matter what, for uh, all anyone, different circumstances, different situations, for everything to be accepted and
Well,
included.
that's a really good point because in the council that we live in, they recently did a really big drive to try and update their queer inclusion policies.
Hmm.
And they actually had a launch event at the local sports and rec centre. And the launch event was for anyone who's a member of a rainbow family.
Mm.
Well,
Well,
my kids are really into sports and rec. So they're at
yeah,
their local sports and rec club thinking, what's a rainbow family? And I mean,
yeah,
neither of them had any idea because why would they ever need to apply that term to
yeah,
themselves? So that was just really interesting and so telling that these are just things that society brought to them. It has
mhm,
nothing to do with their identity,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Mm.
yeah. And I know, like growing up, see, the thing that's changed is, I don't know, for me, if you're in a rainbow family, yes, kids don't know different. They've got people that love them. They're surrounded by love. They're surrounded by a family. Um, but let's say, for example, like you named a rainbow family, that's what society's put on us. And then it comes with even like me with my neurodiversity. I'm labeled autistic. I'm labeled ADHD. That helps me get medication, okay? But one day I'd love to live in a world where my mind's just different to the next person. Does it have to mean anything? You know?
Yeah, it's not something that we ever really have to talk about or focus on. It's extremely non-topical in our lives. So it's always interesting when it becomes topical because it's usually indicative that someone else is encountering
Yes,
unfamiliarity.
it's
But
been, yeah.
like, well, we're not. It's just our lives, right? So
And
yeah.
people seem to be scared of different, don't they? They're scared of what they don't know. Um,
And we get a lot of curiosity, and I find that sometimes people need a little bit of help with that. So, for
mm,
example, people often wonder who the birth parent is, you know. I don't know why it's relevant, but like they just really, really want to know. And it's like, so ask, you know, like
mm,
you can totally ask. It's no problem.
yeah, it creates
Yeah.
awareness as well.
Yeah.
You're raising Jewish children, correct?
Yeah.
Jewish children in the context of global political conflict. With close family in Israel, that's a whole other
Mhm.
dimension of complexity. So, what's it been like trying to be a supportive partner, a parent, and educate at the same time when the world feels so politically raw? We work at a university, there is always things going down. How does it feel?
Um, Good question. It feels real.
Yeah,
Um, it feels really authentic, you know, because humans exist all over the
yeah,
planet. And I, just like everyone else, am a global citizen. Whether, you know, whether they realize it or not, people are members of our collective global community.
mm-hmm.
And having having something so awful as a large cultural conflict, religious conflict, political conflict happening just so close to home. You know, we haven't had warfare on Australian soil sort of in my lifetime, in many people's generations actually here, depending on your definition of those things. But I mean, with regard to actual ballistics,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's oh, that's my dog, sorry.
That's okay. Other dog.
um, yeah, and so it's kind of you know, a lot of cultures have a lot of things happening, and I work with a lot of Ukrainian people, for example, and you know, there obviously been a lot of conflict. They're back home for them, and these are things that people conceive of as being back home or on the other side of the world. But well, they're not back home or on the other side of the world for us. They're right here. They're in our family. You know, they're my nephew going off to the army. You know, they're people being worried about their loved ones. They're people having lost their community members. These are really big, terrifying, hardcore things. And it's very easy for them to be uh, brought up a little bit carelessly. So as you mentioned at the university community, you know, it's a really, really diverse community. We have a huge amount of internationalism there. It's a wonderfully rich culture. So when people have a really big feeling that they want to move forward, it's like fair enough, but it's important to remember that there's a lot of people in the crowd and they're all going to have a lot of different feelings.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
something I've um something I've really benefited from is trying to maintain a lot of open-mindedness and a lot of calmness. And I think just that general sense of we're all in this together. We are all global citizens. We're all here to help each other and support each other. And whatever problems there are, that doesn't take away our personalisms and the fact that one person can still sit down and have a really respectful conversation with another person, no matter how different their views may be. So that's something we've been trying to hang on to a lot.
Mm. Yeah, it is. It is difficult. Even I see things happening at work and the politics and the flags, oh, everything, and it feels like it hits you in the face, and it hurts. It does. It does hurt, especially when you don't know. It's easy to put a flag up and say, go this, go that, but I think some people forget about the people behind that. There's
Yeah.
good, there's bad people in the world. Doesn't necessarily mean that one group is good, one group is bad. They're the people behind it. That's sort of how I feel. It's sort of hard to dictate that feeling. It's all in my mind. I don't know if it's coming out right. But yeah, just I feel like there's people globally. There's good people. There's perhaps bad people, and that shouldn't stick to a certain group or religion or political group or anything like that. And it makes it incredibly hard when we see all these protests and stuff like that happening. And for me.
Yeah,
But at the
I
same time, I'm sort of going, go stand up for what you believe in. You believe in that, go. But it does personally, it hurts a bit. Yeah.
And I think that's that idea I was saying about respectfulness. There are times in cultural conflict where it is genuinely difficult to garner respect for the actions of other people.
Yeah.
That's a really challenging fact, but it is a fact. And we do need to have brave conversations. They can be extremely difficult. It's kind of important not to shy away from them though, because that's the mark of true respect is knowing someone else's situation and being able to bear witness to it with fidelity.
Hmm.
And yeah, I think it takes a certain amount of courage to just deal with that. I come into work and I see the symbols around the place from the student body that kind of personally attacking some of my family members,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And I wonder how my children deal with that at school,
Hmm.
all sorts of abhorrent graffiti and things that are, genuinely confronting.
Yeah.
But well, it's our job to sit down as members of a collective society and
Right.
and look those things in the face and think about what to do about it
Yeah.
respectfully. Yeah.
So Prudence, I'm in a Muslim household. So my husband and obviously you're in a Jewish household. So we've got two people that are supposed to politically not be in the same room, but you can see us two here hurting for all the people that are hurt, and we're hurting for people all over the globe. All over the globe that are hurt where family time, they're losing their homes, and to both of us, it hurts to see those people hurt. It's not about
Yeah,
sides at
absolutely.
the end of
But
the
and
day.
that's
People are doing bad things and they shouldn't be doing that. Peace is made by having conversations. Um, Peace is made by coming to terms with what you cannot have, what you can have. Uh, the world is a funny place, but at the end of the day, we're all people, regardless of our beliefs. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and I think it's something to be said for the fact that I'm an
Mm.
educational designer and you're also in that space, is
Yeah,
that there's
yeah,
a certain amount of humanism that needs to come with that role
yeah.
because the learner cohort will invariably be representative of humans in all their
Mhm.
shapes and forms and
Yeah,
conditions and constraints or whatever that may be. And I find for me personally, it's very useful and comforting, but also just rationally and logically, I think it's a really good approach is actually just to be a bit of a humanist.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, here we are. So I'm struck by how you hold so many identities at once. I think it's absolutely incredible. And how our society still struggles, though, to hold space for that kind of complexity. I feel it. You feel it too. I want to ask gently, as a survivor of sexual assault, how do you feel that aspect of your identity is intersected with everything else? I can completely empathize with you here and know that you're not alone in talking. But your gender, your education, your regionality, how does that all intersect with sexual assault? And, all of us sexual assault survivors obviously have trauma that comes with that. So we're not going to go into this too much, but the intersectionality with that.
Um, yeah, look, yeah, I'm sorry to hear that, Brooke. I'm also incredibly unsurprised, I suppose, would be my
Yeah,
response.
it's a much larger
Sexual
percentage.
assault, yeah, sexual assault survivorship is devastatingly close
Mm,
to the norm for
yeah,
women in Australia. That's rural, remote, regional, metro, culturally and linguistically diverse
yeah,
immigrants, just white Australians like
yeah.
myself. We
A lot of
are,
them.
um, yeah,
But quite
unfortunately, there's a
often.
huge amount of survivorship happening around the
Yeah,
place.
and quite often
Yeah.
in children, and there's a quite a high percentage of autistic children that have been sexually assaulted as well, believe it or not.
Yeah.
When I read
So
that out in my training, I cry nearly every time.
because they're harsh figures, and I think something really positive that's been happening in my lifetime is everyone taking the time to start to come to grips with the
Hmm.
magnitude of these issues. These are very, very large systemic
Yeah,
societal problems. They're very deep-seated. They have existed for millennia.
Mm.
and are in a lot of societies. And if you look at those types of stats across countries, depending on what you're specifically looking at, they kind of balance out pretty well. Here in Australia, we have a pretty high level of filicide, actually, particularly for female children,
Hmm.
and that often ties in with intersectional issues as well. So I think that aspect of my identity is actually one of the ones that's really among the norm. And, it might have been more taboo when I was young, and it's still taboo to this day, or just flat out dangerous for women to discuss. But um, for me personally, it was part of my regionalism, as in I wasn't necessarily surrounded by safe places and faces, which
Me
I think
too.
is
Yeah.
I think that's really typical for kids in the country, particularly when they have working parents or
Yeah. Yeah.
really large families. You're often at the babysitters, or you're often waiting at a bus stop, or you don't have people supervising you all the time.
Yeah. Correct.
So in my case, I was a very young child. Again, it's something that's pretty sad, but if you want to take a sort of silver lining approach to it, we are making progress, and there are a lot of initiatives, particularly in educational spaces, like for example, Our Watch, that really are starting to collect the facts, collect the data, collect lived experiences, collect testimonies of survivors, and do things with them and try to create change and try to change the language and the policy around the way women are interacted with
Mm.
and treated and considered and governed and managed, right? So I think that those are all really, really positive things. And, the work of people like Grace Tame, someone who's experienced grooming as a child, and
Yeah.
then grown up as a survivor and said, hey, there's a problem in the terminology here. I can change that legislation. I can make this different. I can change the way Australian society thinks about this thing and move it from being something that is not noticed to being definitively in the criminal category. And
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
massively powerful. And I feel really excited to be in an educational space at a
Mm.
time where I can use my experiences to start to instigate meaningful change for other people. So that's pretty cool.
I'm absolutely everything you said as me all over. I feel like I was 4 years old, and it went on every week, once a week for 3 years. Uh, and it felt like it went on and on. And sometimes parents don't notice that when the child is told, don't say anything, I'll do this
Mm,
or I'll do that. You don't, and it becomes normal after a certain time. The worst part was for me, I think, when we talk about grooming, they say happens to a child. In my
mm,
opinion, grooming happened to me as a young adult.
yeah.
And that was the second time I was sexually abused. So you start to think, there must be something wrong with me. What am I doing? This couldn't have happened again. And when it happens the second time, you freeze. It's so weird. You freeze. You don't scream. You don't yell. You just let it happen. And it's almost like your mind's telling you, let it happen. You'll be safer. You'll be safer that way. Sexual assault has definitely been an intersection between, first of all, my autism, my ADHD for sure. But also, I think social comes into that as well, how I was viewed as a woman. And um, professionally, I was once hired just because the boss wanted something from me. So there's a lot of different intersections between a sexual assault, but in my opinion, PTSD has come from sexual assault, and PTSD has been the intersection within many things, within all different mental health and my
Yeah.
my intellectual capacity. So many different
Yeah, I
sections
really,
there.
I really relate to that book, and
Mm.
I'm very sorry to hear that you've had those
No, no.
experiences. But again,
We are the
I'm
power at the end
quite
of the day.
yeah, I'm quite unsurprised.
Yeah,
Again, this
yeah.
is just so far away from unusual for Australian women and for women around the world, and as you point out, for children. So I think I think, yeah, good on you and all power to you and all power
Yeah,
to me
you
and
yeah,
all the
you
other
also
survivors
and all
out
the other
there.
survivors, that's right.
Yeah.
Together we've gone through this horrid thing once, twice, three, four, however many times it's been. And just know if you're out there that you're not alone. There's a lot of people out there that have been through this, and you have the power to come into a collection of many other people to create change, because we don't want that to be a normal thing in the next generation. Hell, if I'm going to let my daughter grow up in a generation where that is happen to every second woman out there. That's not cool.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
word.
yeah, so I really appreciate you sharing that. Survivorship is such an under-discussed form of intersectionality. It's one that deeply affects how women move through the world, especially those trying to climb socially or professionally. We still know that that happens. Do you ever feel that your ambition or intellect has been culturally punished?
Uh, yeah, I mean, in a nutshell, yeah,
Yeah.
I would say a very, very fervent yes. Yeah, that really ties back to this being a woman from the country kind of vibe. Being the kid who uses big words,
Yeah.
the fact that that's an insult that's been leveled at me a few times in my life is kind of was always a source of a bit of amusement for me because, of course, I'm embracing rationalism and I'm very interested in things, as in I have a sense of curiosity. And those two things together are probably, I would say, my most valued attributes. I just hold them dear, dear as can be, and they give me enormous joy. And I kind of have always found it interesting that they're the things that people seem to think are less cool. And when I say people, I mean the few people who've ever ostracized me on the basis of having ambition as a woman in the country, or on the basis of just I guess daring to speak up, or daring to speak in full sentences, or daring to want to contribute in something other than the conventional norm for which I guess some people might think that young women in the country were born for. But it became really empowering for me quickly when I realized that actually not everyone's like that. Those voices, they're quite few and far between. And I realized I could just find my people kind of in any setting, that most people aren't like that. Most people are just delightful. Most people want to get to know you for who you are and to watch you succeed and to help you
Yeah.
succeed if they can. Like I have found incredible friendship along the way and incredible inspiration, particularly in a regional town. Two women I admire most actually currently in a Victorian sense are Jacinta Allen, our premier. She's from the
Mm.
town I'm from, right? Like, she's grown up in a minority group in a regional town as a woman, and like she's Victoria's first female premier. I just think
Yeah.
that's so impressive. And it's also true for Virginia Trioli, the journalist. She is warm and relatable and fiercely intelligent and is evidence-based. And I've had great role modeling, I think, from my regional roots. There are so many fabulous people out there. So the fact that there are components of Australian society that look to hold women back inadvertently or intentionally or maliciously or otherwise. For however much there is of that goes on, which is real and is something women are definitely facing off every single day in a myriad of ways. Look, for however much of that is, there are absolutely multitudes more of people who are just looking to move forward together
Yeah.
and who understand equity and are looking to embrace it and support it and foster it. So I feel very heartened by that every day.
Feel like I've been in several situations throughout my life where I've mentioned I'm autistic and they've looked at me like a deficit, um, uh, like I'm a deficit. And that can be quite hurtful. But as we grow older, we really pull the strengths out of each other. And we get that a lot at work. There's so many different people at work. And the truth is that I don't think I've ever looked at someone and judged them. In fact, I've been excited to meet them and learn what their strengths are and what I can learn from them. So as you get older, I think life does get better like that, especially for people in marginalized minority groups.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that for me as well.
Mm.
And one of the things that I really like sort of I know this sounds a little bit counterintuitive, but I just love getting old, you know. It's one of these things
Love
that, and
that.
particularly in the country, you know, I'm often asked why I don't get my hair done, or oh, you know, you
Because we
don't
don't
wear
give a shit
makeup, or
anymore.
I
And
don't
why?
wear, you know, I don't wear heels, or you know, all
Yeah.
these, you know, conventional girl things that have never
Hmm.
made very much sense to me. Which are fine. They're all delightful. Like being extraordinarily effeminately girlish in a conventional
Hmm.
way
Like me.
has its joys, right?
Yeah.
But for me, I've just really enjoyed growing up, getting old, and seeing what it's all about. Like
Mhm.
just getting to see what it's like as you grow older is really in itself extraordinarily delightful. And on top of all of that, you get more confidence as you go,
Yeah.
right?
That's right.
So my
Yeah.
ability to ignore or recontextualize or recast those types of perceptions as I encounter them
Yeah. Yeah.
is something that is increasing with age. And
Yeah. Yeah.
it's been such a pleasure as a parent to be able to help my children navigate the way that society wants to cast their authentic selves. I get to help them repitch that however they need to get the most out of their lives. And gosh, that is just one of the most joyous things about being involved in young people's lives.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like for me, I'm probably a little bit different growing up on the poverty line when you don't have a lot. And then I grew up and I just wanted a suit in every color and to express who I am, to express myself. And I love doing that. So that's sort of two very different people. But at the same time, I don't give a shit anymore in the way that I'll wear whatever I want and I don't care what you say. And so
Yeah.
it's a very different thing. But I mean, moving on, we've touched on so many intersections today. We've touched on and if I can, rurality,
Yeah, rurality.
queerness, chronic illness, survivorship, politics, parenthood, education, and yet the core thread running through it all is this extraordinary resilience and refusal to flatten your identity. If there's one more message you could leave for educators, designers, or even policymakers about supporting people whose lives don't follow the expected script, what would it be?
Oh. Um, well, look, to be honest, that's you know, I think it's all there actually in the question, isn't it? All of those people exist. So like if you want to support them, you'll have to acknowledge them and know what their problems are,
Right,
right? So I
right.
guess taking time to get to know people and letting them self-advocate
Hmm.
is probably one of the most powerful things you can do if you're in a position to help someone up the social ladder or to help someone realize their ambitions, or if you can help to design a system that's going to be better for whoever the users are or for whoever the consumers are. Yeah, definitely. You need to know who they are and you need to let them tell you who they
Yeah,
are. You know,
know your people.
you can't just decide who they are for yourselves. You'll have to actually listen to them. And
I guess.
I've benefited a lot in my life from having people listen to me
Yeah.
and get to know me. And I really try to do the same. I really try to bear witness to people as they are with whatever fidelity they're bringing to their lives. I can't recreate it for them, and they're going to have to bring themselves to the party.
Yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. So, right, I feel like the correct quote for this would be, I'm a totally quote person, would be, um, take time to read the book before the cover, right? Cover
Yeah.
last. Read the book first. See what's up. Don't judge before getting to know your people, as you
Do
said.
you know, yeah, something like that, exactly. And knowing that the book is there in the first place, realizing that, hey, you know, there's quite a few books on that shelf. It's
Mm.
not just
Be a
one
book
shelf.
person.
Exactly. It's like there's heaps of books out there.
Hmm.
You know, people come in a lot of shades
Yeah.
and as we've discussed, they just have such a huge diversity of
Mm.
experiences affecting the way that they're experiencing the world. So, you know, you kind of got to let them say how it is for them and also say what they want to get out of it, because then people aren't just a snapshot of the here and now. They're not just who they are today. They change. We're dynamic wonderfully complex beings. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
you and I could have this discussion in a week's time, and hey, the answers might be a bit different, right? Because I'm going through it, same as you are. And this is a lovely, lovely song from some folky stuff from the 2010s, which is the best thing about growing up is we all do it together. Yeah. And it's really, really true. So we get to come back and revisit these discussions and see how people's ambitions have changed and see who they are today. Because it might not be who they were 2 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, as Shannon Knowles said, take a good look and see the little people. That is so, so important, right? Because I feel like some of the bigger guys just don't look down at the little people either. And that's where change is, and that's where the reality is, and that's where people are living. And some people, they keep it up in these high meeting rooms, but they need to look down sometimes as well, I feel like. So that's all really powerful. Prudence, thank you so much for your honesty, your insight, and your strength. This conversation reminds me that diversity isn't just a buzzword, it's the texture of real lives. And everyone is so different. And we're all living real lives still, right? So, um, as a last word, thanks everyone for listening to Dominating Diversity. I'm your host, Brooke Tahir, and we'll be back next week for another fierce voice for redefining what it means to thrive on the margins. Until then, keep dominating. Thank you.